All right, we got the mechanical arms race that kills online games from North Star UK. Okay, let me see.
Multiplayer games, particularly player versus player games, are a very difficult thing to get into. No other type of
No, I don't think so. You just get the game and you start playing. What's so difficult about that? Back in the day when I was a little kid playing Halo for the first time, well, not a little kid, when I was a little teenager, it was about as simple as getting an Xbox, getting the Halo game, getting a controller, putting all that in my bag, and then riding down to my buddy's house to go have a good old LAN party playing Halo. That was complicated.
entertainment media.
It's even simpler nowadays. You're either on your console, on your PA or your PC. You get the game and you just start playing.
Has the minimum skill requirement that can be found.
Oh, the minimum skill requirement. Oh. Yeah. There's a lot of games, specifically multiplayer FPS games, where there is a minimum skill requirement depending on the game you're thinking about, you're looking at. Is your game based around controllers? Is your game based around M&K? Is there crossplay? Is there not crossplay? How strong is the aim assist? How weak is the aim assist? Yeah.
Particularly in modern titles. For decades, gamers have been enjoying and mastering a huge variety of games. And as the medium ages and the technology that drives these experiences improves, what gamers are capable of continues to expand. Gaming has been a staple for so long now that some have played their entire lives. Some have even built multi-million-dollar careers.
Yeah.
Professionals who play games competitively at live events in front of millions of spectators and fans, all by refining their craft over tens
Oh, you showed swag.
of thousands of hours. The rise of the competitive gamer has been nothing short of meteoric, but it does make you wonder, what happens when everyone you play against is super competitive? Competitive culture in gaming is rife.
What happens when everyone around you is competitive? Well, I mean, conventionally speaking, you think about regular sports. I mean, wouldn't that stand to reason that if everybody's pretty competitive, everyone's trying to constantly figure out the new meta, the new thing that'll help them get that little extra bit of edge, even more so in like team sports. I would imagine. I mean, if you look at like 1v1 sports like MMA or something like that, I imagine it's pretty competitive there too. But I don't know, it's different when it's a team-based sport. There's more money on the line, NFL, MLB, NHL, FIFA, the world sport of soccer. When there's so much on the line, so much money invested, when it comes to competitive contests, I usually will ask the question to like a general, I don't know, consumer of, I don't know, any contest really. If you watched your thing, what do you care about more? Do you care about being entertained more, or do you care about competitive integrity more? And I think for the most part, people care more about being entertained. That's what I think.
And touches every game, whether it fits or not. Sweats, tryhards, cheaters. Familiar accusations to those who inhabit the online gaming space.
Yep.
You can't go 20 minutes in an online forum without someone complaining about someone else. And while extremely common, it's not always unfounded. Play any online game long enough, and you're bound to run into someone who takes it extremely seriously.
Yep.
Who treats it like a day
job. The whole cheater thing, cheaters only cheat in popular games if they give a shit about the game, if they think the game is worth a damn. You don't really find cheaters in like very small niche community games. Like you can just because they can, but that's not really the norm. The more popular a game or like an FPS is, in terms of like multiplayer, the more likely you are to find cheaters amongst all the ranks, but more specifically like the upper ranks.
Job, despite the clear absence of pay or even recognition.
Mhm.
Someone who has optimized the game down to the finest details through thousands of hours of trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a bad thing? Like, sure, you can do whatever you like with your free time, but does this have any sort of notable impact outside of annoying the occasional Redditor? Could competitive culture, for example, kill off a game's player base?
Can competitive culture kill games? I mean, depending on who you ask, one side of the internet thinks yes, the other side says no. Me personally, I think you can't have a competitive game without like an esports scene. I mean, if you're a developer and you are trying to make a competitive esports ready FPS, so on and so forth, you need to have a competitive scene because it drives what do you call it? It gives like everybody that is in the 99% something to like strive towards, to look up to. It's like, oh shit, I didn't even know that was possible. I gotta try doing that. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's what I thought when I was a little kid playing like Modern Warfare. I watched all those like FaZe Clan, what do you call it, like montage videos. I watched old school competitive Halo, old school like Call of Duty League, and so on and so forth. I thought that shit was awesome. I was like, these guys are getting paid to play video games? That's cool. That's my little kid brain.
In today's video, we're going to dissect the way player skill influences online games.
Oh, using, what was this, Fall Guys? Using Fall Guys. Bro, Fall Guys. What really kills games is people making, people bringing the competitive culture into a game that was not designed to be competitive in the first place. And there are some examples where that is an exception. Look at Super Smash Bros. Melee. The initial intention behind that game was to be a party game. All right? So look at what it has become now. It's like one of the few fighting games that has been around for so many years. The competitive Melee fight scene is still alive and thriving. So long as the tippy top players still like maintain their skills and whatnot. Also, you chose to show Monster Hunter Wild. I think it was Monster Hunter World had like a huge impact on most of the people in the United States, and that it was like the first human versus big monster type of game, kind of like a Souls-like, but not really, but kind of. And you had these things called speed runs of just certain monsters, like a little bite-sized piece of what it was like to be like a speed run person. You position correctly, you measure like all the damage numbers, the geometry of your moves, your positioning, trying to read the AI and figuring out what move is supposed to, start and stop there. So there's all these, like, Monster Hunter was not designed to be competitive at all, but it was the community that decided, hey, we really like this game, so we're gonna do something and take it, like, we're just gonna add our own self-imposed like mode in the game called speedrunning or time attack. And yes, there is a scene for it, and the competitive integrity of that scene is a little questionable in some cases, but I think for the most part, people try to do like a pretty good job of having some sort of competitive integrity amongst the general community, but I mean, it is what it is.
Look at some examples of games that might have been affected and potential ways that these themes can be mitigated. Let's cover some important terminology first. The skill ceiling is the measure of the potential peak performance in a game. It's not generally quantifiable, but it becomes fairly apparent through a deep understanding of a game's mechanics.
Yeah.
The skill ceiling depends by and large on what the game lets you do, willingly or not. This limit may rise or fall depending on updates or discoveries made by players. It's something that is actively coveted by the more competitively focused, for fun or profit. In that
Peak performance is usually, you could probably measure peak performance by what is possible in the game based on a task bot, tool assisted system. So you'll see things like a task combo in Super Smash where it's like they take the character from like 0, do some crazy combo, and then just like completely destroy them. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's possible, but is it possible for a human to do that? So most of the time, humans in games try to emulate like the most perfect reads, the most perfect combos, even in fighting games, and try to mimic like a machine-like skill. In FPS, you try to be fast with your flicks, or you try to track the target pretty perfectly, and so on and so forth. So they're always chasing this like machine robot-like performance of like perfection. That's what everybody's trying to do.
In that vein, you have your own theoretical skill ceiling that might be different to the game's. A maximum ability level dictated by many variables, like age, natural ability, or available playtime. Conversely, the skill floor is the minimum performance required to play something.
Yeah.
It's really the focus of conversation outside of games that have different methods of play, like unique builds or characters. The skill floor is at its lowest when it comes to single player experiences, as these are often designed to be extremely approachable.
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that it is true amongst most single player games, but what is one community that has pushed the limit of single player games? The speedrun community. Games done quick, summer games done quick, winter games done quick, or whatever little event there is. These people take their favorite games, invest a shitload of time into them, and they play a single player game extremely fast. So even single player games, while the skill floor might be initially really low, if you choose, you can engage in speedrunning your game. So even single player games are not above, having some competitive stuff injected into it.
Customizable experiences, fit for any level of play. The use of virtual opponents, or AI, means that players can make a game as hard or as easy as the developers allow them. When it comes to multiplayer games, however, it's rarely that simple. The difficulty is not just dictated by the developers, but by other players as well. For example, to play at a certain rank in a competitive game, it might demand a much higher skill floor for it to be enjoyable. A game might have a lot of mechanical depth or meta builds that put you at a disadvantage if you don't keep up with them. You might start a game late in its life cycle and find yourself behind in its progression.
This is a problem of a lot of games. The longer a competitive game stays out, the less and less new players will go to play that game, because they realize the cycle of a competitive game. Oh, it's season 22 in Apex. Oh God, how am I supposed to catch up with all these other people trying to play the game? It's like, oh my God. But there should be systems in place like skill-based matchmaking to divide the players up accordingly, with some sort of a degree of certainty amongst the ranks. You got bronze, silver, gold, plat, diamond, master, Apex Predator or top 750, on PC. You would hope a system like that is very accurate in trying to put players into like their respective ranks.
This can change how accessible a game is to a general audience,
Yeah.
particularly the casual crowd. Much like you have your own skill ceiling, you likely have your own skill floor too, which is essentially your tolerance for how bad you can be at a certain game before you quit. More experienced gamers might have higher standards for themselves, but they might still be performing above average compared to most people, but it's not enough for them specifically. The skill floor is why game balancing, the act of modifying a game to keep the experience fair, is a significant part of post-launch work. It's so important that even the level of game balancing must be balanced. Don't balance enough and people will feel cheated or forced to play against people who have unfair advantages. Balance too much and nothing sticks out, and everything becomes stale and samey. This is all to say that
imbalance is generally what the casual crowd wants. And balance is what the competitive crowd wants. They don't want a lot of variables. They want sameness. They want integrity, like competitive integrity. Nothing should be like surprising them. Nobody wants to get knocked from like a headshot, Kraber shot in like ring 5 when they had no idea there was one even in play or whatever. It's like, oh, where was the counterplay in that? There was none. You should have known.
That multiplayer games are an ecosystem, one that is maintained both by developers and players, with people entering and leaving constantly. These ecosystems also mean that active player count is something that is
Bro, why does Banana have a 24-hour peak of almost 900k? Let me see this. There's no shot. Steam charts Banana. I swear to God. Why? Why is it almost 400k? 13 minutes ago. Bro, these are just like auto clickers. Like, come on. All these clowns trying to make up, trying to push this damn little banana sticker thing as like a currency. Jesus.
Track for many different titles, and you can directly see how well a game is performing in the public eye. The launch of a multiplayer game tends to be the point in which it has the most players. Not always the case, but it holds true for most anticipated AAA releases. At this point, both the skill ceiling and floor are at their lowest. People are still getting adjusted to the game, and the full spectrum of experience level can be encountered.
This is also the funnest time when a game initially comes out. Because nobody knows the meta, nobody knows what's good, nobody knows what's bad. Everybody's playing, experimenting with different things. This is the fun part of the game.
This is usually when you'll run into the largest number of casual players. After some time, the player count usually starts to decline. This isn't really an indication of a game's success or failure. Games built off a lot of hype will invariably have that hype fade. And even really well-managed games will struggle to maintain their initial player base. At this point, both the skill ceiling and skill floor start to creep up. The logic behind this is that you're much more likely to stick with a game you understand well over one you don't. Therefore, those players who struggle to play the game are more likely to quit. And the players at the bottom of the skill ladder become less frequent opponents, either because they leave to play something else or because they just get better. This rise in average skill is extremely apparent for games that don't see a steady influx of new players. As a game continues to age, this cycle continues. Experienced players get better and better, and the player
Halo Infinite 4.5k. Oh boy.
base slowly bleeds active players until they die, whether that be in 10 days or 10 years.
Or 12 days in the case of Concord.
This is a typical multiplayer game life cycle. It's not an exact science. A lot of games' post-launch success depends on what the developers and marketers do with it. Some games can even eventually eclipse their initial player counts, but over a long enough period of time, this will be the fate of every game. YouTube videos behave much the same. They get most of their views early on, but after a while only the more dedicated fans come back to rewatch them. I mentioned that players will leave games that they are bad at. I'm sure if you've played a large enough variety of games, you've invariably come across one you didn't click with at all, got destroyed in a couple attempts and uninstalled, in some way failing to reach your required skill floor. But I also mentioned that skill floor is dictated in part by the people playing the game. So the question is, does the skill floor play a significant factor in player retention?
I think it does. Why wouldn't it? Why else would the phrase easy to learn, hard to master exist? That's a tried and true formula, one that a lot of successful multiplayer games abide by. Easy to learn, hard to master.
BattleBit Remastered is a multiplayer FPS game that left early access last year. It was developed by a very small team and did extremely well after it got some traction on social media. You may have seen clips of it before, or maybe even played it. The gameplay is very akin to early Battlefield, but boasts a low poly look that makes it a lot more approachable, especially for players living the low spec gamer life. The modes are strictly team based, and you work alongside many other players to win. It peaked at over 86,000 players post-launch, but since dropped to a few thousand just under a year later. By most accounts, a success story. However, some community members suggest that the project was mismanaged, and that the development speed was too slow, which meant that it lost the potential of becoming an FPS staple. Now, I would describe myself as pretty good. I would say at least better than most.
Nice shot.
I do have KD of over 2, which I'm very proud of. However, I'm acutely aware of how high the mechanical ceiling goes. It has all the hallmarks of a first-person shooter with a crazy high skill ceiling. Mid-air strafing, snap aiming, sprint reloading, meta builds, just to name a few. The game certainly does not discourage players from playing in a very sweaty way. Despite all of this, early BattleBit was actually a very casual environment. Most people weren't very good, and most of the clips generated from the game were from people messing around with the proximity chat.
Yeah.
However, as the average player got better and better, and understood more of the mechanics and the maps, it became progressively harder to play the game casually. Voice chat got quieter, and the focus shifted towards keeping up with other players. The game quietly lost what had made it popular to begin with. In my opinion, the game's primary shortfall is that it failed to nurture what should have been its main strength, teamwork, and instead bolted an extremely self-sufficient, mechanic-focused playstyle. It doesn't
Teamwork. That's one thing that game devs try to always push on players. Teamwork. Think about all the, I don't know, just competitive games that you've like seen or played. Teamwork, team. It's got to be about the team. You know, it can't be just you. If you want it to be just about you, go play fighting games. All right, that's 1v1. But when it comes to shooting games, it's about the team. Always the team. You know, Overwatch. What was that? 5v5, 6v6, Counter-Strike, Valorant. What else? Apex, Call of Duty, Halo, Gears of War, Fortnite. It's not a team, it's a squad. Same thing.
take much playtime to realize that you interact with your team very little. It didn't help either that the devs seemingly kept buffing things that made working solo more convenient, like the healing bandages, that over time have not only increased in number, but also heal you more and are applied quicker. At this point, you must force yourself to team play, otherwise you're just running from objective to objective, shooting people on the way, which not only gets old very quickly, but when mechanical skill is the primary focus, not playing well matters a lot more, since there's no other aspect of the game to fall back on, like interacting with your team. I think even the devs noticed this too, as they added a squad preference screen, where you can choose how serious you want your squad to be.
Recon, default, tactical, vehicular. Group up with other players who play recon. Mainly play as recon class. The squad is engaging in medium to long range. Group up with any others randomly with no specified thing. Okay. Tactical. Group up with other players who play in a tactical, semi-mil-sim style. Okay, this is like the talkie one. Okay, this is the whatever. I don't give a shit. This is, what is this one? Medium to long range? Like, was this like the sniper squad? And then people just want to play in vehicles. Okay. Even this with the intent about this is intended to be used to find like-minded people, but if you're a solo player, you're simply going to pick the best squad type that puts you near the most enemies. That's what you're doing as a single, like as like a mechanical, like solo, like driven person. Like I want to get the 100 kills, the 200 kills, 300, however much it is in battle bit. You're gonna pick the squad that gives you the most opportunities to come in contact with the enemy team. That's what I would do.
An overwhelming focus on mechanics that drives non-mechanical, casual players away, whether intentional or not, is the crux of the problem.
Heavy focus on mechanics over community features. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty true. But the heavy focus on mechanics is something that the audience has like done for each, competitive game. If the game is being made and the competitive nature is like the main focus, you're going to attract the competitive people. Don't be mad when you have like a garden full of flowers and then all of a sudden, oh, where's all these bees coming from? Like, God dang it, I don't want all these bees there, or whatever, whatever the analogy is. Like, don't pour honey all over the sidewalk and be upset that there's like ants everywhere crawling to come get the honey. Okay? That's what's happening.
And BattleBit is far from the only game that suffers from it. I describe it as the mechanical arms race. And it's a really tough thing to quantify, but it's noticeable on both an individual game scale and across the games industry as a whole. In some way, either as a symptom or a cause, games get too competitive for their own good, and bleed their casual audience because of it. It's a problem not just for competitive games, but casual ones too. It's often such an issue that you can almost tell how competitive a game is going to be in the future, just by playing it for a few hours.
Yeah.
Answer this question for me. Have you ever played a new release, either alone or with friends, and had that thought creep into your mind that you're not going to be playing this game in a month, despite how fun...
Have I ever played a new game, a new competitive game? Is that what you said?
By playing it for a few hours. Answer this question for me. Have you ever played a new release, either alone or with friends?
Well, I mean, you said just like new release of a game, so I'm just gonna assume you mean like a competitive game. I mean, if I'm like getting a game or just like a single player game, the intent is to just consume the content at whatever rate I want to. If that takes, a month, a week, 2 weeks, however long, maybe I'll play the game again. Maybe I'll do like a new game plus. I've already really made up my mind. But when it comes to competitive games and a new competitive game gets released, like look at Deadlock. Deadlock is not even like released yet. It's like in the beta stage still. And already people are coming out with like meta sheets, flow charts, and counters. This counters this, that counters that. And the game is literally already solved and it's in the beta stage. And because that game was designed to be competitive from day one. But as far as me, like, trying to figure out, am I still going to be playing this game in a month? I don't know. I think my initial, competitive bug was, that I took it seriously was Apex Legends, years ago. And I was, okay at it, and I think I played, and what do I have, 3,000 hours into it. which ain't nothing, but it ain't something either. I just got burnt out from it because I was just like, I'm coming to grips with like, maybe I'm not that good, so I'm just gonna stop, which is very true. And trying to get past that 1 month mark, I don't know if that's what goes through a lot of players' heads. Am I gonna be playing this game past a month? So if I am, I'll give it the time of day, and if I'm not, maybe I won't give it the time of day.
And had that thought creep into your mind that you're not going to be playing this game in a month, despite how fun it might be in the moment. Or maybe you're playing a game and you suddenly become aware of how the game operates, and you can foresee what the rest of your playtime would look like.
Do I want 40 more hours of Doom? Yes. Yes, please.
So what if I do that, you might be wondering. What does it matter if I play a game for 100 hours and then burn out after a couple months?
I mean, as long as you don't regret your time playing, then I don't see the issue, because throughout that 100 hours, you are having fun the whole time, I would assume. I mean, why would you play something and then get done with it and then regret playing it? I don't think gamers are like that retrospective in like terms of thought. I mean, maybe there are like a minority of gamers that do that, but I don't think that's the norm.
I still got my money's worth.
Yeah.
For you, not really a problem. But it runs counter to what most multiplayer games companies are aiming for, and it's having serious implications for the gaming industry. Games as a service isn't all too new of a concept, but has surged in popularity as of late. The concept is simple. Games are supported post-launch with new content, and in turn you continue to play the same game, and continue to support that game through various means. This is why it's common for someone to have a main game that they play more often than others, as introducing new content to an old game keeps it fresh, and means that fans get more of what they know they'll like. This tends to work in favour of games companies too, as they get more money from the average player with much less to...
That's crazy. GTA Online made $500 million last year, according to new report. So in 2022, how old was GTA? What is this one? GTA 5? How old was GTA 5 in 2022? Was this in like was this when GTA RP was like just ripping? It had to have been, right?
Development time. A 2023 study that surveyed over 500 games companies reported that 95% of them were aiming to release a live service game in the future.
Yeah.
The only limit to this system is that these...
But I think Concord bucked the trend on that. So did Helldivers. So did Suicide Squad. So it's not just because we release a live service, you have to buy it. That is not the case. Most of the time, people already have a main game. And if another live service game comes out, they can't just fit the same template. They can't just do the same thing because you're not offering anything new. Players already invested in another game. You think they're just going to stop playing that other live service game and then just start investing in this one? Just because if a player doesn't have any money, they have time, and that's what they have to use to invest in things, is their time and effort. And the longer somebody plays a game, the more likely they are to spend money on the game. You think I want to be like so like in love with multiple live service games that I'm spending some money on so many microtransactions on each live service game? No, that is not the case. That is far from the truth.
These games live and die by their ability to retain players, which involves not only keeping people interested year round, but also competing against other similar live service games for their attention too. If Apex Legends, for example, flopped on release, that likely would have killed the Titanfall IP right then and there, potentially alongside Respawn Entertainment. While the gaming industry is huge, there's only so many players to go around. So maybe sort of ironically, competition is fierce. So what does this have to do with game mechanics? Well, you have to enjoy something about a game to continue playing it. There's only oh so many marketing tactics a game can pull, and if you find a game too stressful or uninteresting, most people can't be manipulated forever. Even addicts will eventually drop games that stop treating them well.
Yeah.
But casual players can drop a game over the smallest of things, which means that how a game handles its experience determines a lot about how it performs publicly. And since so many games are vying for your attention, the options to go elsewhere are usually extensive, which means that it's easier and easier for games to bleed casual players if they're not careful.
Yeah.
New games must also compete with established ecosystems that have now been around for an incredibly long time.
Yeah.
Counter-Strike, for example, has been around for over 20 years at this point, and as much as I'm sure veteran players love to poke fun at the game, how the game feels to play has been carefully refined for decades. Even now, Counter-Strike continues to break player records year.
CS2 has more players than the next top 9 Steam games combined. Come on, like how many people of these, how many of these are real and how many of them are just like bots? Like, come on. Just sitting in there farming, what do you call it? Like the little gun skins and whatnot. Like, come on.
Over year. It's kind of like picking between a friend you've known your entire life and a new person who may or may not be a better friend in the long run. You might try hanging out with this new person, but you know exactly who you're going back to should things turn bad.
Yeah.
All of this means that producing a live service multiplayer game in such a saturated market is a serious gamble. Now, having a game flop because it fails to retain a casual audience is a very real issue faced by many in the space. When it comes,
Yeah, I mean, why would you as like a new game developer try to gamble on making a live service game? Yeah, like the risk is there. Risk nothing, gain nothing. Big risk, big gain, and all that shit. But like, couldn't Helldivers have came out and been a single player game? Or not a single player game, but instead of a live service, just kind of make it like Monster Hunter, where there's like a bunch of different types of quests, and you could either solo each quest, or you could like flare up and just like put like a beacon down and be like, yo, somebody help me out. Did it really have to be like a live service battle pass and all that shit? Like, could any Concord have came out and could they have like done something? Like, if Concord came out and not only did they have their multiplayer thing, like the whatever 5v5, 6v6 thing, but they also came out with like a PvE thing, something that Overwatch fumbled the bag on. I guarantee you Concord would have like ran away with the bag. You know, you could have put like maybe a couple more years. Like, you put 8 years into just multiplayer only to come out with just different version of Overwatch. You couldn't have just made that and then spend a considerable amount of time making like a PvE mode for the game with skill trees and all that shit. That would have been so funny.
When it comes to talking about skill in games, it would be silly not to talk about the elephant in the room, which is skill-based matchmaking. The idea is that a game measures your performance, usually through some sort of rating system, and then curates matches so you play with and against players of similar skill to you. The main benefit is that it provides tangible progression for players in ways that some games would lack otherwise. It also helps prevent less experienced players from getting stomped, and it allows games with smaller lobby sizes, like 2015's Rocket League or 2023's The Finals, to maintain a sense of fair play that wouldn't exist if things were random. Chances are, if you're watching this video on game mechanics, you likely have seen some strong opinions on skill-based matchmaking.
Oh yeah.
You might even have some of your own. A common perception is that
I still gotta read that dang Activision paper for the whole skill-based matchmaking thing. That thing has to be a meme. I don't know, maybe I'll do it later or something. Skill-based matchmaking ruins the enjoyment of video games, especially team games. Skill-based matchmaking is fine when it comes to the ranked version of that game, but it sucks ass even if there's a like SBMM light in the public mode of that game. That's generally the main gripe I hear.
that these systems, even when well managed, frustrate players and sometimes don't prevent the things they were designed for, like unfair matches. A long-term concern with skill-based matchmaking is that, almost against your will, you're fast-tracked into a competitive arms race just to enjoy yourself. Since everyone you play with has, and usually expects, a certain minimum level of ability, there's no opportunity for you to relax and maybe take things a little slower.
Yeah.
Your reward for playing well is harder games, and your reward for playing casually is, well, losing.
Yeah.
So in some way, you're left with no choice but to endlessly improve, even if focused gameplay isn't what you're looking for.
But if what you're looking for is not focused gameplay, what are you doing playing a competitive game? You are being a burden on the community. You're trying to drop a 20 bomb, a 4K in Apex, trying to just be casual about it. Nobody has ever done that. Nobody has ever gotten what's the like the max rank in Rocket League? God dang it. It was like Supersonic Champion or some shit like that. Nobody has ever gotten like Supersonic Giga Champion casually. Every Supersonic like whatever has had to put in the maximum amount of effort. If you want to play something casually, go play a different game entirely.
On a larger scale, these systems also promote competitiveness and raise the mechanical skill of your average gamer, which in some ways is a good thing. The recent competitive push has allowed mainstream games to become more mechanically complicated.
What game is this? Self-destruct toggle? What game is this?
And include greater depth, as your average gamer is a lot more competent at understanding new games than they were in the past.
Oh yeah.
However, this does mean that multiplayer games in particular are harder to approach at a casual level.
Too complicated, too complicated.
It's almost a requirement for any player versus player game to feature some sort of rank progression, as a lot of gamers have come to expect that whenever they're faced with human opponents. The near absolute saturation of competitive modes means that, oftentimes, non-competitive modes might as well be competitive anyway.
Yeah. Another very cool and seamless topic. Transition incoming. Access granted. Bro, the music choices so far have been on point.
The Finals is a free-to-play, team-based, first-person shooter released at the end of 2023.
Oh yeah.
I've spoken about this game before on this channel, but to give context here, it mixes a lot of different shooter styles to make quite an interesting blend of both familiar and experimental mechanics. The game has a very typical player count story, a really strong start with over 200,000 players, and a slow decline as the months rolled on. As of May 30th, it's at the lowest player count it's ever had.
Yeah.
Although it looks like it's going to stay at around 15,000, a 94% drop in the initial player base over 6 months. Which might sound bad, but for Embark Studios' first foray into gaming, 15,000 daily players is something new games companies would give anything for. I really enjoyed playing the Finals. It has a lot of fun with different mechanics, like...
Oh yeah, same. I played Finals for a good amount. That game is great.
Environmental destruction. It gives it a nice edge over more streamlined FPS games. It also encourages team play in a really healthy way, as each class has strengths and weaknesses that make it dependent on teammates to work effectively. The problem for me, and something that ultimately led me to stop playing the game regularly, was the matchmaking. My first impression of the game was extremely strong. I was really enjoying playing as each of the 3 classes, and the people I was playing against were admittedly not very good, and I felt a lot of control over whether our team would win or not. However, as I continued to play and win matches, I found that the matchmaking was putting me against increasingly difficult, and overall sweatier, opponents. Suddenly, the fun strategies I was implementing stopped working against players. and the potential scope of the mechanics began to narrow down.
Yep.
It even got to the point where I felt like I couldn't use certain character abilities, as they would almost universally achieve 0 results.
Oh yeah, because the thing with skill in a lot of these video games is that, like, okay, line. You have this and that, and then you have. Okay, how am I gonna do this? Do I do this? Can I grab this? Okay, so let me do the brush. And then let's extend that right there. And there's a little bit right there. And there's a little bit extra right there. This is like more or less like a standard bell curve. You know, you can cut this thing in half. And then let's say like right about there. That's another chunk. This is like another chunk. Most people resign in here. This is like 90% of people. There's like, I don't know, 5% right there, which is like brand spanking new. And there's like about 5% here, which is like the upper limits. So right here. Okay. We got another chart. It's like standard bell curve. Ooh, everybody knows that. Now, this is... Okay, Okay, I'll just say this. You would think that skill is linear. This is what most people think skill is. Or what they want skill to be. But that is not the case. You know, if down here is like 0 and up at the tippy top is 100, and then you have like time. So skill will be linear up until a point, and then it just gets exponential. Or like for something else, or it just gets exponential. And this is what the reality is for most competitive FPS games. You don't know how good someone is, you know, whenever you're watching like your favorite tournament or something like that. Like for Overwatch or Counter-Strike or Valorant, or pick your favorite FPS game or whatever, or your favorite sport. What you are seeing is like the tippity top, like, I don't know, like top 10 people in the world. Like there is no one better. Okay? When you watch the actual tippy top people playing, you don't know how good they are because you're just simply like watching them. The players that are playing at the tippity top are so good, you don't know how good they are. Like you could kind of guess. You know, it's like, oh, I could hit that shot if I practice enough or if I track enough, so on and so forth. It's like, oh, I could hit that. Shit, my buddy can hit that and he only got like one arm. That shit easy. I could do that. Skill is actually insanely exponential at the very bleeding edge. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. Because if they did, they would be more okay with it and just more accepting. But since that's not the case, people just really want to like reject everything at that point.
I even eventually went entirely off the heavy class, as it felt too clunky.
Yeah.
I couldn't contribute positively.
I think for like whenever I stopped playing finals, like what was the meta team? It was like heavy, medium, because there was nothing the light class could do really besides like the little EMP grenade. That's the only thing that they brought, like shut a shield down. But even when you shut the shield down, they have a dome. And it was like the heavy classes just had so much more health That was like, it was like, I think that was the meta team at one point. I don't know what the meta is right now. I don't really play finals anymore.
Very quickly, the game became just another sweaty shooter.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that I never actually touched any competitive mode, I would find myself getting annoyed at certain classes and common matchups.
Really? I thought the introduction and the trying to get into the competitive mode was really good. Like, you had to do like, what was it, like 50 public matches, and then you had to do like 50 tournament matches. And then once you did that, then you unlock like the ranked tournament mode. And I thought that, and like by the time you get done doing that, like your 100 matches or however many matches it was, you have like a pretty good grasp of the game. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. More FPSs should do this. And plus, it weeds out, cheaters and Smurf accounts, because you have to go through those, that initial good chunk of matches to even make a new account.
And I wasn't having nearly as much fun as I was when I started out. It's not even that the game is bad, it's a really well made game with interesting mechanics.
Yeah.
However, I was hoping for a more casual experience, and it's not one I could find within the game's matchmaking. But being disillusioned by a game due to its matchmaking does raise an interesting question. Is it really the system's fault to begin with?
I don't know. I think if you're looking for a casual experience amongst the shooting genre, you should probably play something that you don't have to verse other people at. That's what my thought process would be. I'm just going to go off on a limb and shill for a great little game called Crab Champions. This is a super fun game. It's a roguelike. It's a shooting game. And it's I think it's like what, like $5-10 or something on Steam. I don't know. This is a great game. It's fantastic.
You may have heard this phrase before. Given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game.
Yeah.
This is a quote from Soren Johnson, one of the leads on Civilization 3. It suggests that some people view games less as an entertainment medium and more as an optimization puzzle. One that...
yeah. I mean, the reason for this is that most video games are catered towards young people, and one thing that young people don't have is money. What do they have? They have a lot of time on their hands to develop the skill of the game. So, like I said before, people want to really believe the whole linear gain of skill. Most people, well, given the opportunity, will optimize the fun out of a game. For young people, they choose to invest in a game with skill, and they use that video game as like a form of escapism. And because reality is very unfair, people want to have like some form of control in their life, like the gym or like a sport or a hobby or something that people think they can have like control over. So where do they pour all of that skill, time, and effort into? Well, they pour it into a game. And in that game, they believe that they are the master of their reality. Everything in the game makes sense. If I perform badly, it's my fault. Or in a lot of cases, if you play like some games, it's like, if I perform badly, it's my teammate's fault. It was his fault. Or it's a meme. But yeah, people do not want to have their time wasted, really. That's what I think.
No matter the game, can be solved through either practice or understanding mechanics. The problem with solving, or even attempting to solve, a game is that it effectively becomes complete and no longer interesting. And the more games you play, the better you get at solving them, and the easier new ones become to solve. I mentioned earlier the concept of figuring out a game's systems, and knowing that eventually you'll stop playing. That's you effectively solving the game in your mind, almost seeing the future of what the game will offer, and deciding that, since you already know what's coming, it's not worth sticking around to see it. The destiny of games is to become boring. not to be fun. Those of us who want games to be fun are fighting a losing battle against the human brain, because fun is a process and routine is its destination. While this quote is more about
That's a really good quote. That is very true. I never really heard of this quote before. The destiny of games is to become boring. Okay, so then I'm just gonna enjoy the journey of making my favorite game boring. Yeah, not to be fun. Those of us who want games to be fun are fighting a losing battle. Well, yeah, that's the fun part. The fun part is the journey up to the actual point where you think the game is boring. Up until that point, you're having fun. So what's wrong with that?
process, and routine is its destination. While this quote is more about gaming's place among society in general, I think it applies here too. The ultimate problem is that what makes a game interesting is some degree of uncertainty.
Yeah.
If you knew how a strategy game was going to play out,
I mean, isn't that what it is with like real sports too? I mean, yeah, you can kind of know and kind of like guess what the opponent is going to do, what kind of ball they're going to throw at you. They're going to throw a fastball, curveball, change up, or whatever. It's the uncertainty and your ability to react and adapt to the new situation.
out from start to finish, you wouldn't find it interesting. Like how tic-tac-toe stops being an interesting game to play once you know how to never lose.
Yeah.
However, uncertainty is uncomfortable and something most people avoid fanatically in their day-to-day lives. The irony of gaming is that to enjoy it at its best, you must chase uncertainty and avoid optimization. It's why games like Rust and DayZ, relentless survival games, which from an outsider's perspective seem like a nightmare to play and manage, are insanely popular. There's a thrill to their uncertainty, that there's no guarantees from moment to moment, and even logging on doesn't guarantee you the same position that you're left with. Competitive gaming, both as a genre and a subculture, is about removing uncertainty in as many aspects as possible. And while professional gaming is a beloved subgenre of gaming,
Yeah.
it directly defies games with more casual intentions. Which
Yeah.
means that games can lose their casual communities extremely easy if they're not careful.
Mhm.
And since casual players tend to outnumber hardcore gamers by a significant margin,
Yeah.
live service titles rely heavily on being able to retain them for long periods of time. But what can be done to counteract the mechanical arms race? It's a systemic problem that is reinforced by competitive trends in gaming.
Well, isn't that the reason with like balance patches and things like that? Well, not really balance, but like whenever the game or your favorite game gets changed in some way, from the dev's perspective, they want the game to have like a little bit of like newness to it. It's like, oh, you thought you solved the game, but now we changed it up a little bit. Now you have to solve the game again. But if you take that logic and apply it onto real sports, it doesn't really make sense. Well, it kind of does, because real sports has like rule changes and whatnot. You can't tackle the quarterback as hard. You can't like whatever changes there are in basketball or baseball or whatever. You're constantly trying to like throw the baseball hard and fast as you can without like. And then was it with baseball? You can only throw like X amount of pitches until you just have to go put in like your second or third string or whatever pitcher. But I don't know. Maybe like I don't know. Talking it out, it seems like there's a little bit of overlap. Like the core gameplay of a video game is usually about the same, and it's just engages in a little balance patch or something like that. Maybe like a new character comes out to like shake up the character meta, or a new gun comes out to shake up the gun meta, but the core mechanics are there, much the same way that sports are. If a rule change gets implemented in the new rules, the core mechanics of the sport are still there. It's just you're going to play the game slightly different. But then why are sports why do sports have such like more staying power than a video game?
And while it seems like a far-reaching problem that's nigh impossible to solve, there are practical things that can be done on many levels to counteract it. On a personal level, if you feel like the games you play are becoming too stressful, or they're just routinely frustrating, it's okay to switch to casual or more controllable single-player experiences. The concept of retiring from competitive games is a frequent phenomenon, especially for older gamers who have much less time to keep up with the race. Even just partially stepping away can do wonders for your enjoyment of games overall. Another option is to pick one competitive game to main and then avoid all others. For game developers,
Because if you look at any individual game and you look at the top performers of each game, what are the behaviors that they engage in? Well, they simply play the most. That's how you become the best. Seldom have I ever seen people that play games be good at multiple competitive games. That's like a very rare thing.
because it's a difficult situation. No matter the type of multiplayer game, it's an open invite for players to try and optimize it. But the best course of action is to make something non-mechanical the primary selling point. It could be story, or a social feature, or any number of things. If you want to make a competitive game, it's better to fully commit to a competitive experience, rather than having it be a small part of a wider game.
Yeah, this like half-assing the competitive part and then half-assing the casual part is just like a formula, one that a lot of games just are doing. But I don't know, the formula's working, so it's like, why change what ain't, or why fix what's not broken? Really?
It's important to note at the end here that gaming isn't necessarily fated to continually get more competitive. There's plenty of evidence suggests that the opposite is happening. All one has to do is see what the most popular games of recent years are. Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, Lethal Company, all games without any competitive underpinnings. It's also fairly evident through browsing online forums that there's a growing disdain for competitive elements in video games, particularly matchmaking algorithms. Maybe one day in the future, games might find a happy balance between casual and competitive all on their own.
Yeah.
But until then, it's probably best to keep your head on a swivel.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. This is my first attempt at a larger project video. I might have missed some things, so if you have anything else you'd like to add down below, I'd love to read it. If you'd like to see more deep dives like this, be sure to subscribe and check out my Patreon for behind the scenes work on both old and upcoming videos.
Huh. I mean, shit, dude, that was a good ass video. You put a lot of time and effort into it and it came out great. I love it. But let me see the shot. Let me see the shot. What? Let me see that again.
So if you have anything else you'd like to add down below, I'd love to read it.
What do you do, just no-scope somebody?
If you'd like to see more deep dives like this, be sure to subscribe and check out my Patreon for behind the scenes work on both old and upcoming videos.
Okay. You just lost your breath there, dude. Oh man, I think that happened to me one time. I had the same thing happen, same reaction, like, did I just do that? Oh man, good shot. But more importantly, good video, dude. Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with a lot of points that you made, and I don't know what is going to happen with the future of like competitive games, because casual games have been like surviving and thriving for like the longest time, and whenever a competitive game gets made, it's like there's so many things that have to fall into place for the thing to survive. The mechanics have to be good, the core game loop has to be good, though that's like first and foremost, and even that step is hard as hell. It has to have a good artistic style. It has to have a lot of customizability within the HUD. The vibe of the environment has to be like, it has to be good for a competitive environment. You don't want a bunch of busy looking scenes, something to where the player can just blend in the background. And you also have to have a good matchmaking system. You have to have a good anti-cheat system. You have to be able to make money at the game if you're gonna have a live service game. Like, there's so many things. Like, the barrier to entry of making a solid competitive FPS game is just so high. Barrier to entry is so high. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe something else will come up in the future. But yeah, I'm a fan. 100%, dude. And yeah. But other than that, that's pretty much it for me. I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right, later.